My name's Dave Burke. I'm Director of Recruiting for RGP. We're a global consulting firm. I'm the Director of Recruiting for the Carolina practice in Charlotte and take care of North and South Carolina. The reason we're here today is a large part of our business is what we classify as information management, which for us is program and project managers. So the PMP is a sexy certification. We're a W-2 company, so we hire full-time employees, full benefits, and deploy to our clients. That's the extent of the commercial I'm allowed to give. But let's talk to you later. We have a booth downstairs across from the booth. I'm here to introduce Mark Bruinooge. So Mark has broad experience in advertising and leading business transformation projects and enterprise growth initiatives. He's also launched several startups and developed new concepts in digital, interactive, and consumer markets. He co-founded Seismic Partners in 2005. Prior to Seismic Partners, he led online sales marketing efforts at Bank of America. Mark Bruinooge.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's good to be here. A couple of things up front. This will be a pretty loose presentation. Loose meaning I've never given this. This is actually a hybrid of two presentations that I've given publicly, so we'll see how it goes. It's kind of a guinea pig. But since we're talking about startups today, that's kind of what startups are, mostly experimentation, I think, at least in my experience. So I'll talk a little bit about who I am, because I think it's important to kind of set some of the context of my comments and maybe hopefully build a bigger dialogue. I'd like to not only talk, but obviously have some reciprocity in the conversation. So if any time you have a question, comment, thought, etc., interrupt. We've got a really small group here in a good way, I think. So I also want to talk about kind of this concept of what is an entrepreneur. When Tom Gray reached out, it feels like a year ago, it's probably more like 4 or 5 months ago on this topic. He was like, hey, it'd be cool if you could come in and kind of give people a different perspective. So how many people here have worked in what they would call a startup, or how many people can consider themselves entrepreneurs? So a couple, at least 3 to 4. Okay, cool. So that's
if you're married to one.
If you're married to one, that's even worse, actually. Yeah. My wife's a psychologist, and I think if she didn't go to school and understand what she knows about how my brain works, it would be I'd be in a tough situation. And then I want to talk about this concept called an entrepreneurial ecosystem. This morning, Professor Gill touched on the concept of community and ethics, and I think actually a lot of what he was talking about resonates with me. So I want to kind of make some comments, observations, have a little discussion on what that means. And I think it's important in light of perhaps some of you who might work with larger enterprises around project or process management, and how ecosystems can, how we can learn from some of the entrepreneurial ecosystems we're seeing in our economy. I also am going to touch on this concept of social entrepreneurship, mostly because it's actually a self-interest, meaning 2 of the startups that I've been involved in the past 5 years actually have a socially beneficial outcome against them. One is a private for-profit company, C Corporation. The other is actually a foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. So I don't tend to look at things. I'm kind of business model agnostic usually when I look at an idea. For me, it's like, is it a problem we're solving? And if it is a problem we're solving, how can we apply talent and capital and hard work and thinking against solving that problem? And then I do want to talk about this concept of process. I'm this might be a faux pas in your industry, but I kind of interchange project management with process management sometimes, largely because I've never actually experienced a project manager who just kind of manages the ebb and flow of a project. They're usually employing some process, or at least trying to optimize a process. So I'm going to use the word optimization a lot. I did spend 3 years inside of a large company called Bank of America. I jokingly sometimes say it's the 3 worst years of my life, and that's not serious. I actually really thought they were an amazing company, and they are an amazing company. I'm still a shareholder, but I just personally didn't fit in there. Like my way of thinking and acting and working just didn't work culturally. But I did learn a lot about project and process management there. I did become Six Sigma certified as a green belt. Really, I think to this day, credit a lot of what I learned there with how I actually iterate in an entrepreneurial process now, which I'll talk more about. And then, I just kind of alluded to it, but if there is this kind of secret sauce in entrepreneurship, right? Why do entrepreneurs innovate quicker, better, faster? Why do they create things and disrupt things quicker, better, faster? If you believe that, in some cases, I do believe it. In other cases, I think sometimes companies do a better job, actually. Large enterprises can do a better job innovating. But I want to talk about what are some of those lessons learned, what applications are kind of transferable from kind of early stage startups into the large enterprise, and then kind of why does this matter? I'd like that to also be somewhat back and forth. I can talk for an hour and 10 minutes, or we can have a conversation. So I prefer the latter if at all possible. Cool. So a couple foundational things, like what is an entrepreneur? I would say I am an entrepreneur. If you ask my wife, if you met my wife at an event and you say, "What does your husband do?" She would say, "He's an entrepreneur," largely because she doesn't know what to say. And that's one of the challenges of what happens. The definition here, a person who organizes or operates a business or businesses. That second part is interesting because like right now, I'm attached to probably 3 different businesses. That's another reason why my wife is confused about what I do. You can't say, well, he works for Bank of America as a fill in the blank. And then this concept of taking greater than normal financial risk. This is the one thing that when I got to corporate America, and I'll talk more about my background, but I was around entrepreneurs for the first half of my career. I started as actually an investment banker. So if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, my bio says Wall Street refugee on a path to create value, make a difference. I truly view it that way. Like I kind of grew up in Wall Street between 1994 and 2001 in the technology sector, right? So amazing time, but very easy to kind of be successful, right? Everything was kind of rising. All tides were rising. All boats were lifting with those tides. I actually went from doing mergers and acquisitions work in infrastructure software into early stage venture investing. So crazy, but at the age of 29, I was given purvey over millions of dollars, investing anywhere from $2 to $10 million in up to 10 software companies. I thought I was taking risk, and I definitely was with other people's money. The real risk takers were the entrepreneurs we were investing in, right? So the concept of taking greater than normal financial risk is inherent in being an entrepreneur. You almost have to view yourself as somewhat outside the herd, in front of the pack, because if you don't think you're taking greater than normal risk, you're probably not solving a problem worth solving, which at the end of the day, if you wake up and don't see alignment there as an entrepreneur, you're going to have a hard time getting out of bed and doing something. So I'll talk more about that. This thing called Seismic is interesting. Tom Gray and I met through Seismic. Tom worked at Seismic for a bit. It's kind of an outcrop of who I am, and I have a founding partner there as well named Steve Halloran. He and I are both entrepreneurs. We both have actually started businesses and failed miserably in a few of them. So we have a common bond there. But Seismic is actually a platform. We describe it as a platform that allows startups to be born. We've launched 3 companies there since 2005. We also are hired by large companies, large enterprises, to go through transformation projects. Mostly, they're asking us to kind of bring the entrepreneurial DNA, process, approach to life inside the organization. Some of those deals have gone really well, and just like startups, some of them have not. Most of the times we're called into what I call hairy situations, restructurings or bankruptcies. A few examples, just last year we were involved in the turnaround at Reader's Digest, which is an old publishing platform headquartered in New York City, went through bankruptcy. Another bankruptcy, an entertainment company called Six Flags, largest theme park operator. And then a very interesting business model that was very disrupted over the past decade, Jackson Hewitt, which is the number 2 tax prep company in H&R Block. So, as I said, I'm kind of business model agnostic. I'm also kind of stage agnostic sometimes. I can spend anywhere from 1 to 2 years on a project being paid as a consultant or an interim executive at a company that's literally going through a disruption or transformation. So I'm a little bit odd in that I don't spend all of my time in startups, and I don't spend all of my time in big transformation. I kind of do what works for me, and that's what I love about Seismic. Is it's rooted in this concept of solving problems that are worth solving and doing it with people that you respect and places that you want to live. I do live here in Charlotte, meaning I own a home. I have a wife and 2 kids. They go to school here. 2012 and 2013, I was in New York City in an apartment running a startup 4 nights a week. The year after that, I was in Salt Lake, in Provo, Utah, driving a turnaround of a private equity-led consumer product every other week. So it's one of those things like personal and business life. In the entrepreneur's mindset, sometimes there's no separation, and you just kind of give it all until you have no more. And in some cases, it's with a big company, which is really rewarding, sometimes financially, but also it's really fun to be parts of bigger teams and help and kind of bring people to another level. So that's kind of something about me. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what I've learned so far, and then transition into kind of defining some concepts and even exploring some notions around how entrepreneurship has kind of not just been interesting and cool. Like, it's great that Instagram gets acquired by Facebook for tens of billions of dollars, or billions of dollars, I should say. It's cool that two young guys created something called YouTube, which has completely transformed everything about media. My 10 and 14-year-old boys no longer watch TV in our house, literally. Like, our TV sits dormant. AT&T must be laughing at how much money we pay them for that service, because our kids literally use YouTube for all their media. So I think the outliers that you and I think about and we hear about in the mass media and the press, the success stories, right, are the outliers, truly. They're not normal, and by no means are they covering the basis of most of the entrepreneurial activity in our economy. Yes, tons of wealth was created when Mark Zuckerberg, took Facebook public. And yes, there were, hundreds, if not thousands of employees who became multimillionaires, but those are still limited events. They're disruptive and interesting, but at the same time, they don't cover the majority of entrepreneurs that are kind of every day kind of, getting up and building companies. So some of the things I've learned, and again, I want to kind of bring this into the context of Tom's initial ask of me, which was like, what do you know, Mark, or what can you relate as how some of these project managers actually experience day-to-day in large enterprises. So failure is not fun, right? But it's also not the worst thing that can happen. When I was at Bank of America, it was almost impossible to say, like, hey, one of the points of this process is to actually fail several times, right? It was completely like you could never say that. So when I got there, and I took over the digital marketing team. At the time, digital marketing was kind of like a misunderstood concept at Bank of America. It's 2002 going into 2003. So I would go into the room against, a series of other executives in budget and planning and strategy in the fall, and the question would be like, well, how can we spend money on digital when we know billboards, or we know TV ads, or we know newspaper and magazine articles are better, or ads are better to drive response. And so the benefit at the time was that digital was the first thing you could really measure accurately, right, end to end. At the end of the day, like, I actually am more of an analytical, data-driven measurement person than I am a creative. I think I'm probably 51% analytical and 49% creative if you had to put numbers on it. The fact that I put numbers on it shows I'm probably more analytical, right? So failure, when it's measured, right, quantitatively, sometimes can be actually more comfortable for large enterprises. So in the past, failure was we spent $10 million on a campaign and so many checking accounts or credit cards were sold. What we proved there with digital was not only is it about what the end sale is, but it's about actually building a relationship, right? So it's not only about how much of that online ad costs, but when we took that online advertisement, converted it into an online banker, we were able to measure how that online banking customer engaged with the bank like never before, right? When you walk into a branch with a credit card offer and you say to the branch manager, hey, I'm here for my 0% credit card, most times that offer goes into the waste bin and the manager kind of takes over the relationship and gets kind of caught into more of a sales process, which is a great thing. And online, we started to transform it at Bank of America around measurement, kind of end-to-end life cycle relationship measurement and valuation, right? So as an online banking customer, the chance of you leaving over a 5-year period is actually less than 3% once we get you paying bills and checking in at least twice a month. So taking quantitative measurement and showing executives in large organizations that you can measure risk, especially in something that they haven't done before, is critical. So you can look them in the face and say, listen, like, we might fail at this, but we're going to learn every step of the way. And we're going to measure failure. We're going to measure quantitatively how that failure actually feels to us, but also how it impacts our business. I call it, like, we're not going to throw Hail Marys, right? We're not just going to back up and throw 80-yard touchdown passes, which is how I characterize buying billboards and buying newspaper ads. I just basically said at that time, we can either take some risk, or we can watch the rest of the world kind of take risk and outbox us. what also I've learned is building a community, which Professor Gill talked about earlier, is essential. It's so easy as an entrepreneur to get kind of bogged down and to wake up and to focus only on the 5 or 6 or 7 things that are on your to-do list in a given day. I'm actually mentoring a software startup in Boston right now. Successful entrepreneur. He actually built and sold a company 15 years ago, and he unfortunately couldn't bust out of this entrepreneurial lifestyle, so he started another business. And I'd say about 50 to 60% of our conversations are around, who are you connecting with? His name's Alex, actually. Alex, who are you connecting with in the community, right? Are you going to the meetups at MIT? Are you talking to other CTOs? Like, how are you challenging everything you're doing? If you're isolated and heads down as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be successful. And that's what I've seen. Most of the failure that I've hit as a professional has been when I get too focused and I'm not looking for feedback, not looking for new ideas, and sometimes criticism. So isolation, I think, as well, in larger enterprises is a problem. If project and process management becomes kind of this isolated entity that only cares about getting something done, following the process, doesn't become part of a community or an ecosystem, I think failure is often inevitable. And then, be part of a flourishing ecosystem. That's different than just be part of the community. Always question, like, are the elements of the ecosystem, the people, the resources, are they flourishing? Is it growing, right? Is this something that's positive? Does it energize you? Does it give you something you need? And can you give something back? Is there reciprocity? I think, again, this morning we heard a little bit about on ethics. This is about how you feel, right? If you feel driven and motivated and connected to the cause and to the mission, I think you're going to have a lot better chances of success in driving a positive business outcome. So I always question our team at Seismic and the startups, the teams I'm building on, like, is this a flourishing ecosystem, right? Are our investors helping us, right? Are our employees challenging us? Are our mentors asking us the right questions? If any of those questions, the answer is no, you have to kind of cut and move and pivot quickly. Some more learnings from the real world. This is actually part of that. This is part of another presentation I gave, which was targeted around, like, what are some of the drivers of entrepreneurial kind of success or the DNA. Knowing your limits. This is a really hard one for a lot of entrepreneurs. Most are entrepreneurs because they have like a 5th or 6th gear. Like they love it. They're actually driven by the adrenaline. So the risk taking, the cycle of I want to take more risk and I want to drive myself harder, and then hire people who also embody those characteristics and traits is very dangerous. It can be extremely awesome, but can also be very dangerous. So at least one or more of those individuals in that ecosystem has to know their individual limits, and also needs to be able to observe when limits are kind of being breached on any critical team member. I often see this mostly in technology product startups, where the CTO or the lead developer is literally like, this is the one, right? This is the one time I'm going to kind of break out and be known for something. And we choose to take risk, whether it's technology risk or product risk. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But when you can check yourself, I think it's a good thing. This concept of the world is more competitive than you thought. This is one that's easy for entrepreneurs out in the real world to they all know it. We've all learned this, right? You build a product idea, you build the prototype, you release the prototype to a small group of users. They all love it, right? Half of them are your friends and family and former, mates at university or school. And then you bring it out to the real world, and within 10 minutes, you realize there's 10 other companies that are doing the same thing you are. It's happened every time. The question is, at that point, how do you react, right? How do you make something happen as a result? Knowing that and not feeling shocked when you see that is important, right? That can be a huge strike to the ego. I've seen this leading teams. One of the case studies I'll get into today, we had a 10-person startup in New York City on a software product. As soon as we came out, right, it was just all of a sudden the entire team was like, whoa, we're not the only one doing this. And the morale in a startup, especially right after a product launch, is high. And then usually you'll see kind of a dip, kind of 8 to 10 weeks. They call it the trough of discontent, right? It's tons of downloads, tons of registrations. Oh my gosh, we're going to make it. New York Times front page business section story. And then there's the 10 other companies doing it, one in Silicon Valley, one in London. And then it's like you can just feel it. You come in the office in the morning and everyone's like, oh man, deflated. So this is an important one. If people know that it's going to be worse and more competitive than you ever thought, then you're prepared for it. And then this concept of leveraging a process. This isn't mine, by the way. I didn't come up with these words. I don't know who did. I wrote them on a whiteboard one day in our office in New York at this startup called Tycoon. We kind of call it BITLO, BTLO, build, test, learn, optimize, and then if you're lucky enough to scale, you will. I'll talk more about a nonprofit startup I'm involved in right now, a foundation here in Charlotte, where I kind of said that to the founder chairman one morning. I'm like, have you ever thought about this? But I wrote it up on the whiteboard. He's like, no, that makes sense, but let's follow that playbook. So this might be as good as I can get to define what the process is in entrepreneurship. I'm sure a lot of you who have been in startups or even work in big companies follow very similar kind of process. Another really interesting, in my mind, interesting concept that I didn't come up with, but I've been talking about and talked to other entrepreneurs about is entrepreneurs, I think, are really facilitators. They are the facilitators of this build, test, learn, optimize process, right? They are also what we talked about, people who take greater than average risk and are usually doing more than one thing at any given time, right? They're experimenting constantly. But they facilitate this creative process. Most times the process starts with a pain point. Sometimes it starts with more of a capitalistic kind of edge, right? I think I could make a lot of money if I did this, or I think I could solve a problem in a better way, cheaper. But ultimately, you have to facilitate the process. And that's, I think, important. I think project management, process management, whether it's in mid or large enterprises, is about facilitation. I've seen it go really well where the project and process manager in charge is actually facilitating the team rather than kind of running the project. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but running the process is, running calls where you've got 10 people on the line and 4 people on the chat session and there's one slide share going on and you're literally just checking boxes off, right? I'm here to check boxes today. At Bank of America, I think the best project managers, process managers did more than just want to check off boxes on the checklist. They literally facilitated conversations, team building. They facilitated as best they could a creative process amongst a bunch of people who are just kind of dialing in to make sure they did what they were supposed to do. I don't know if that's something that y'all experience, but I see that parallel all the time between early stage startups and big companies. The best process and project managers in small or large are always doing more than just kind of going through the motions. And I just mentioned this, developing a sense of community and purpose, which we addressed this morning around ethics, I think is such an untapped opportunity. It's easy in startup land to get people bought into the mission. Almost in every case, they're not making a lot of money. It's all about what could I make if this thing hits, right? But at the end of the day, finding smart people, defining a movement, like we're going to change the way kids think about and use money, right? We're going to change the way people think about clean energy technology. Easy to get almost anyone, I think, who gets through the interview process bought into that. Building on that and facilitating that day to day is what the entrepreneur really has to do. We're also facilitating kind of the change of behavior, routines, habits, perceptions, right? In most cases, we're facilitating that between ourselves as the company, the creator of the product, and the customer. Most times, startups are not going to solve a problem that's already been solved and already been scaled and addressed. Sometimes, but many times not. So we're literally looking to change behavior. What is the easiest way for this new product to change a behavior in the consumer market and then leverage that at scale and make money at it? So it usually starts with the kind of entrepreneur founder to customer base relationship, which is problematic because most entrepreneurs create products for themselves. I've seen it every time. Like I did it. My biggest failure as an entrepreneur, I built this for my situation and my problem. I just went through the first product launch of this foundation in Charlotte with a similar experience where the founder built the first product for himself and realized that, whoa, that's not a huge market. I'm 5% of the market. So when you do that, you really have to think about what am I asking my customers to do? Not what do I want to do or what do I need to change, but how does this product really disrupt and change the behavior of many? And that's never an easy thing. So it's got entrepreneur as a facilitator. Then what is the facilitator really? Facilitator is the leader. In my mind, startups really don't need traditional leadership. Big companies like Costco and Southwest that were mentioned this morning, leadership is about defining culture, mission, and values. I don't see startups actually needing a lot of that, fortunately. Like I said, most times it's pretty easy. Hey, we're here to disrupt this issue, this problem. My idea is this product. Let's all build that product. Like that's kind of where leadership begins and ends. The facilitation is really the leadership in early stage companies. That concept of product market fit is really all the startup needs to be doing, right? The CEO that comes into a 5-person startup without any revenue and hasn't found product market fit should, I think, be spending less than 10% of their time on leadership. It's mostly about what are we doing to get an outcome, right? The reality, somewhat scary reality in startups is that the only thing you should be doing is getting as much done as possible with as little money as possible, as quick as possible. Like, that's just really it, right? The oxygen tank has so much money in it, and if we spend it all and we don't find that fit and that scale, we're done. And that's a pretty interesting thing. First-time startup employees who haven't seen that yet, you can pick them out. It's like they're coming off the bus. It's like the country kid getting to the city. When you see employees who have done that before, and when I interview to build teams in these startup environments, you're looking for that. You're kind of looking for the people who are a little bit jaded and a little bit scared, but there's something inside that they know. And that concept is like we have to run and sprint to that fit. Otherwise, I'm not going to have a job tomorrow. I'm moving kind of fast, but I'll take a quick break, pause. Any questions, thoughts, ideas? This is, again, this is a little bit black and white on the slide deck because it's kind of just how I'm playing out, experiences.
I just want to mention a comment you mentioned about failure.
Yeah.
There is a book written by John Maxwell called Failing Forward.
Oh, yeah.
And most people who are successful fail many, many times. And there's a lot of examples of baseball players who strike out and folks who write books. And so my son says failure is not an option. So kind of uses that as just a comment on failure.
Yeah, I think that's a good, that moniker fail forward has been pretty prevalent, especially from that book. Most entrepreneurs that I work with, we never are really talking about what we didn't do well. Like as soon as you fail, you kind of know what you didn't do right? So if we need to do, a lot of times, for example, like in the agile process, agile software development, you do a retrospective, right, after a release. I don't know if many of you work in agile, but retrospectives are good in agile. But you don't really have to kind of do so much retrospective in the startup time. Like if the product idea fails, I think everyone knows why it failed. And if your team doesn't know why it failed, then you have, as the leader of the facilitator of the company or the product group, you have to ask yourself, well, what weren't we measuring? Like everyone should be on top of analytics and what's happening, especially if it's a software product. But yeah, I love the concept. I said before, failure isn't the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is actually also rooted in this morning's conversation. You actually violate some ethical or moral thing inside of you. Like you compromise your values. I think that's the worst thing. Losing money stinks, but like actually waking up and feeling bad about what you did to a group of people or a customer base, that is, in my mind, that is the ultimate failure, actually. And I feel that way. You were going to say something?
Yeah, you mentioned that you measure things. I measure a lot of things.
Yeah.
Also, and one of the key drivers is measuring efficiency.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that is hard to measure from efficiency is, he mentioned that failure is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is not also an option. It's you have fear.
Yeah.
And that also impacts efficiency.
Yeah.
And what is the strategy you recommend for that?
Kind of being in that zone of efficiency, like enough fear and anxiety to drive you, but not so much.
Yeah, you can, like you say,
that
the person is, there's enough oxygen.
Yeah.
And you need to act quick, pivot,
Yeah.
quick act. But at the same time, that fear could be making you inefficient.
That's right.
And
spot on.
And what is that right dosage?
Yeah.
And you can have a dream time. You can allocate the time to worry. You can allocate time to strategize.
Yeah.
But how would that's one way I try to tackle fear.
Yeah. So the way that is spot on. I love that analogy because there's a zone, right? Just like I don't know if anyone's ever if anyone's into running. Like I'm not into running, but I try to be into running, right? And so there's a zone where your body will burn the most efficient amount of oxygen and sugar glycogen. So you can literally run, half marathon. I've never figured out how to run in the zone. I literally either go too fast and burn out, right? Or I go too slow and I'm frustrated with my time. So managing fear is kind of like oxygen. Anxiety and fear, I don't know if there's an entrepreneur out there that doesn't have a little bit of a kind of a latent or even fully expressed anxiety disorder. Like most of us are driven by, I'm not moving fast enough, I'm not working hard enough. And not just in entrepreneurs, I think a lot of people feel that way. So for me, my strategy for coping is actually mentors, finding people that their job is not to hit me up on the numbers. It's not to look into the spreadsheet, right, and say, why are you spending this on payroll and that on overhead and this on software development? Why did you choose Ruby on Rails versus Python? Like, we've got a board of directors and we've got advisors for that, right? So the CEO founder gets beat up by one group and then gets kind of, helped and somewhat counseled by mentors.
Do those mentors come from this entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to get into a little bit about, like, over the past decade, there's kind of these incubator accelerator programs that have developed that are rooted in profit. Like their goal is to attract startups and then invest in them and make lots of money when they go public. And then there's the emergence of what I would call social incubators, one of which we have here in Charlotte called Queen City Forward, which I'm on the board of directors of, which I'll talk about. But that's where it's really rooted in for me is the two things I know I can measure. I could look at my calendar and literally say, did I meet with my mentors the past month? That's the thing. One thing too for me is actually exercise. As weird as that sounds or as easy as that sounds, it's true. If I'm not consistently exercising and like burning off stress and adrenaline and cortisol and all the bad stuff that my brain's producing to keep me motivated moving fast, I can look at my calendar and say, oh yeah, I've only worked out 3 times in 10 days. I can look at sleep as the third thing. As easy as it sounds to say those things, I think it's pretty black and white. There's a guy in Silicon Valley, James Altucher, I think it's Altrucher. I subscribe to his newsletter. He's done like this 3 or 4 times in his life. Like makes $100 million, loses 50, makes another 200. Started on Wall Street as a trader, and now he's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He actually talks a lot about that kind of balance, right? What are the 3 things you need to kind of stay in the zone? I think he and I shared the same 3. It's like exercise, mentorship, and then and sleep and rest. Yeah, being able to zone out, right? Just literally, and I do that with music. Tom was kind of maybe joking about the rock and roll show. I play in a band in Charlotte here. That's truly the only time. Like you have to have an activity where you don't think about anything other than what you're doing in that moment, and that shouldn't be correlated to what you do to make a living. That's another one of my tricks.
Thank you.
Yeah. The entrepreneurial ecosystem. So ecosystem, it's funny, I have a 5th grader who's just dealing with some of this. Like, he's like, what's an organism, right? He's reading this in a science book. I'm like, I have no idea what an organism is. I know I learned it when I was 10, but ecosystems are communities of living organisms, right? Organisms rely on each other in conjunction with some of the non-living components. So in an entrepreneurial ecosystem, the organisms are the people, or the companies, or the organizations, right? PMI is part of the ecosystem. It is an organism. Queen City Forward is filled with people. The components of the environment are actually the non-human qualities in my mind. So technology, raw materials, venture capital money, universities, not the people in the universities, but the presence of universities and academic institutions. So, when I chose to move to Charlotte, I actually did not choose to move here to be an entrepreneur. I chose to move here because Bank of America wanted me to move here. They found me and they said, hey, you should come down here. I actually thought about this concept of seismic before I got here and before Bank of America hired me, and I was looking for where's the best place for me to be? Where's the best ecosystem? I went to Boulder, went to San Francisco where I had worked and done a lot of work in the late 90s. I'm always looking for the signs of a healthy ecosystem. That includes, some of those personal attributes, right? Can I relax here? Is it easy to get to the airport? Is it conducive to who I am? Why does that matter? These are all my opinions, by the way. These are all subjective, so if anyone has other ideas, interject. So taking risk is a human-driven action. I don't think entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial ecosystems are capable of surviving unless entrepreneurs feel comfortable enough to take risk. That might sound very simple, but I spend a lot of time in this community in Charlotte right now on that problem. Like Queen City Forward is looking at that issue. We're working with Queen's University. We're working with large corporations in town. How do we build a more functioning ecosystem in this city to allow people to take more risk, to actually incentivize people to move here to the region, to build the economy, to take more risk? So I'll show you a little bit about how we're doing that at Queen City Forward. Also, progress is also a very human-driven outcome. Large companies don't really make progress unless they have the right people trying to solve the right problems. And again, this might sound like an obvious point, but I think a lot of times we take progress for granted. Sometimes companies just hit a gear because they have good timing and good product market fit, and they kind of rely on those laurels. Some of them add marketing and branding to it, and it's like all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, whatever happened to that company? Like, whatever happened to that product? I think when the human side of product development starts to become like less of a driver, you see those stories. And I'll talk about some lessons that I've learned in some of my work on that point. And then change is constant. Change must be the constant and is critical to drive that healthy ecosystem. Change driven by, again, people reacting to external factors. I think just being comfortable with change is something that's important. I've seen this region, this economy do that. I mean, in 2008, I don't know what the concentration of banking jobs is per capita here, but this community did a pretty good job of dealing with that change. And a lot of people had to leave this town and go back to Chicago or New York, and kind of a lot of people had to change careers and change professions. So change is the constant in the ecosystem, and that's an important thing. So I want to talk about business accelerators and incubators a little bit. What I've observed is that accelerators and incubators are actually these ecosystems, right? They're just being created by entrepreneurs who want to profit from the ecosystem, which is kind of an interesting thing. I'll kind of fast forward. Here are according to Forbes at least, the top 10 incubators in Silicon Valley. Y Combinator, probably the most famous in terms of its output. Does anyone here use Dropbox? I don't know if you guys use Dropbox, right? Airbnb, has anyone used Airbnb, by the way? It's a pretty awesome thing. I'm going to San Francisco in November, and I've already rented an amazing house that's like less than a third the price of a hotel room. It's hugely disruptive. So Y Combinator created, or at least housed, incubated those two companies. This is a really cool thing, right? It's actually somewhat of an output of how Silicon Valley has worked for probably the better part of a half a century. We heard about Hewlett-Packard this morning. A lot of large tech companies in Silicon Valley created these concepts of research parks, places where scientists and engineers could go and take risk. They had mentors. It was okay. They could leave their day job, right? And they could go to the park for a sabbatical. Hewlett-Packard actually helped kind of push that concept into the valley. You see the same thing today at Google. I have two really good friends, former colleagues at Google. One at Google Ventures, actually one who went to Google and since left. Google asks you when you come into the company, like, we're going to give you 15, 20% of your time to go figure out another problem that isn't correlated to your job. So kind of that concept of the incubator and the safe ecosystem, I think we're seeing that actually become somewhat almost required in highly innovative industries and geographies. The incubators are also providing more than kind of four walls and internet and coffee and water, which I think those are also major drivers. It's important to have a place to go to actually be psyched about. Like, you walk in the door, you feel energized, there's coffee, there's water, there's great Wi-Fi. Those things sound like commodities, and they are, but if you don't have those things as well, it's going to be tough to drive growth and getting people. But the best incubators in Silicon Valley are giving four walls, mentorship. They're giving the entrepreneur a safety zone, but they're also giving them that kind of concept of discomfort, right? the best mentors at Y Combinator, 99 Startups, Dream It, AngelPad, they're all pushing their people, one step further, pushing them out of the comfort zone every day. There's a group in New York called Techstars that they actually did a TV show on these guys. I think that was kind of their moment of what they call jumping the shark, right? But one of the founders at Techstars, Brad Feld, was on the board of a company we invested in 1999, and then essentially he went on to, he's now kind of the bolder VC of sorts, Brad, and he suffers from anxiety, and he's written about anxiety and depression a lot, but he talks about like his greatest, the greatest value he can bring to the people inside of Techstars is not everything he knows about tech and every mistake he's seen played. It's actually about keeping people in that zone where anxiety is kind of high enough but not too high, and motivation is high enough but not too high to let them burn out. I think some of the big enterprises, big companies, even in this town, can probably learn a lot from the incubator. So then there's this thing called the social incubator, right? So Queen City Forward, and this is kind of the advertising section of this because I'm super proud of this organization, is a nonprofit. So at the end of the day, anyone who comes through this incubator program, let's just say the next awesome startup comes out of Queen City Forward in Charlotte, North Carolina, becomes a $1 billion company. We make no money from that. Literally, there's no skin in the game. Whereas 99 Startups, Y Combinator, they're all actually taking upwards of 15 to 18% of the startup as they're granted admission to the incubator. So there's others here on the planet. Impact Hub is actually a global network of these incubators that are socially focused, meaning the problem you're trying to solve might have a for-profit company, it might have a non-for-profit, but that doesn't matter. This is about getting the best ideas kind of out of people's heads and into society. I love that one. Unreasonable Institute's a great one. Those guys are just kind of very contrarian. They just want it to all be about like, hey, if your idea is unreasonable, like, bring it here. No question is stupid, I think is one of the things they love about startups. So we provide a hub for entrepreneurs here in Charlotte. And the mission at Queen City Forward is actually to drive triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. So we're looking for ideas that are what we call socially beneficial. What does socially beneficial mean? It means that it's going to benefit society in a broader way. That's a pretty broad definition, right? So you could, for example, argue that Uber is a socially beneficial company. It's creating jobs. It's actually taking people who might not or shouldn't be driving off the road when they might otherwise drive. So we've got a wide berth on what the definition is, and in order to kind of qualify and focus on outcomes, we do it with 3 different programs. Impact 3, which is basically the core program, People, Planet, Profit. It's run twice a year. Entrepreneurs apply to come into the program, and then there's a series. They go through basically a 12-week, 8 to 12-week program where they're going to a facility or a location, several times a week, getting mentorship, talking to attorneys, talking to accountants, advisors to kind of help them move through the process. Impact U is actually focused on university or college and undergrad and graduate students. Impact U this summer was just held here. I think 4 of the 6 participants were outside the region. Florida, Wisconsin, actually an idea that was bringing a solar cooker to Uganda. So this concept isn't just about facilitating who's here in Charlotte, it's about bringing people to Charlotte and then providing them access to this programming. This summer's Impact U program, by far the most successful. So, again, back to how I think about these problems, a healthy, thriving ecosystem, right? We're doing better each year, and we're measuring how we're doing better, right? There are more companies leaving these incubation programs, getting funding, failing fast and pivoting and surviving, which is pretty cool. And then innovation challenges. These are more kind of one-off weekend, almost like hackathon types of things. We just had one last weekend here in the 3rd Ward at a co-working space called 809. The innovation challenge was actually focused on food, right? How do we get a broader spectrum of people in Charlotte better access to food? It was facilitated actually by a gentleman who has roots in project and process management. And it was very much a user-centered design kind of approach. I think it was 45 people showed up Friday evening at around 6 o'clock, and by Saturday evening, there were 3 product concepts that literally from there go forth and then either come into the Impact 3 program, or those people just start to commingle and work on the idea. So we're using corporate sponsorship and other donations to drive this kind of programming. And it's early days, but I think cities like Charlotte have an opportunity to tap into some of what's unique about Charlotte, and this is, in my opinion, a good example of that concept of facilitation. Not telling the community what to do, but asking the community to come together, facilitate change and progress. So just it's a little bit of an advertisement, but if you haven't heard of Queen City Forward, definitely keep checking it out. If we do a good job and we get the right companies in there, you're going to hear about it anyways. But yeah.
So what attracted me to this particular session is I own a profit and a nonprofit.
Okay.
And I'm really more interested in growing my nonprofit. Let me just basically tell you what the nonprofit does.
Yeah.
It's very unique in that, and everyone says that you're unique. It's a veteran organization, so we support veterans. I myself am a veteran. And we have given money over the past 3 years. What's incorporated in the state of Florida, we have given money to the James A. Haley Hospital, about $30,000 to $40,000 in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
The definition of the veterans that we support have to be veterans that are missing 1, 2, 3, or 4 limbs.
Oh, wow.
And we bring these veterans to these concerts that are typically hosted by the city of Tampa.
Cool.
And we bring in all the military for free, and we bring in corporations to and charge corporations certain amount of funds. That's how we raise the money.
I get it, yep.
And then we donate it back to the James A. Haley Hospital or to veterans organizations that have those kinds of injured veterans.
Yeah.
So how could Queen City Forward, how could I work with them? Is there something there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, first thing you could do would be to get into the next Impact 3 program. And not every...
And by the way, make one more comment.
Do you live here or do you live in Tampa?
I have a house here.
Oh, good. So we wouldn't have to pay for your house.
Yeah, I have a house here, but my office, I have an office in Tampa, Florida, so I'm in Florida
Sure.
once a month. Okay, but the other thing is I have a board of directors of 3 CEOs that sit on my board. None of us receive any compensation, and when we do concerts, we use anywhere between 20 and 30 volunteers. No one receives any compensation, and we're 501c3 tax exempt under IRS.
Cool.
So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, congratulations on that, by the way.
And that,
awesome.
by the way, that's my passion. I don't
That's
care
good.
if I'm retired, so I don't care if my business, my profit business, I'm growing it.
Yeah.
But I don't really care if it grows.
Yeah.
What I really care if my nonprofit goes and I give back to veterans and to
Yeah.
people.
Right, so are you running the nonprofit day to day? Are you the
Yeah,
number one person?
I mean, I found it, I did,
Yeah,
I
I'd
can
say-
give you more information
yeah,
about
you-
that.
you-
but
yeah,
that's
so-
what attracted me to this particular one.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, so first off, if you or someone on your team at your nonprofit wants to kind of step out of the day-to-day, right? Like go meet with a group of people who can kind of push and prod and support and mentor. The most of what you'll get out of Queen City Forward would be a different perspective. You'd be aligned to a mentor or more than one mentor that has some relation to what you're doing, but they're also going to come from an outsider's point of view. It actually might be a veteran. We do have some mentors that I believe are military vets. So
Right.
I think what it's going to do is give you an avenue to kind of get out of what I call that day-to-day focus, which I think is helpful.
But-
So yeah, if you guys want to talk more about Queen City Forward, we
I'll
can do that
follow
later.
up.
Yeah, I don't. The whole purpose wasn't just to talk about that, but
Right. No, that's good.
I want to walk through a couple quick case studies. We've about 20 or 25 minutes left. These are 2 companies. This one actually I started with someone else here locally. I would consider this so far a pretty big failure. We actually haven't really nailed this idea yet, although we raised a ton of money and have had a lot of recognition. So this company here, Tycoon, started based on a conversation between myself and another entrepreneur, a very successful guy. Doug Levitt, who started Lending Tree. And so we were talking one day about how our kids basically think about and use money. And I did some research, and I'm like, there's been about somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 apps or websites in the past 5 years that have tried to solve this problem, right? If you have children, especially if you have children between the ages of kind of 8 and 12, when money starts to become a big deal, especially in this day and age where money can be spent on the screen of an iPhone in literally seconds. So the tough part about this startup was we started with a pretty big idea, right? Change the way kids think about and use money. The tagline "Start Young, Go Far" kind of was just a natural outcrop of the kind of the shoot for the stars, kind of throw the Hail Mary pass that we wanted to hit with this idea. So at the end of the day, it's about kids, right? So one of the challenges with this product is, unfortunately, when you're trying to solve the kid and money problem, you have to involve the parent, right? Because the parents are the source of the money, and sometimes they're the source of the problem, actually. Most kids don't mess up on money because they develop bad habits on their own. They watch their parents and they model their parents. So when we started this company and we started designing the products, we designed it to be kind of kid-centric, but without really looking at like what mom or what dad needed. So again, just a learning lesson. Sometimes the person you think you're building the product for actually isn't the person you're building the product for. And knowing that early is going to be hugely important. So I'll kind of move quickly. This was kind of day one or day two, right? You go off and you start to say, like, what do kids want? What do kids need? At the time, Facebook was super hot. I think this was in 2010 or 11. And to this day, actually, it's still illegal for kids under the age of 13 to be on Facebook because of a piece of legislation called COPPA, the Child Online Privacy and Protection Act. So we wanted to build a social network for kids who could kind of talk about financial goals, right? I want to support the World Wildlife Fund. I want to buy an Xbox. This week I made $12. So we thought that would be an interesting way to help kids really get hooked on this concept of money, right? Money is social. Social media is hot. Let's build like something like Facebook for kids around money. Big mistake, a huge mistake, right? Most kids don't want to talk about money. They actually want to get stuff when they want it. So despite all the work we did with the kids, all the focus groups, all the process we ran, kids literally looked at us and said, like, yes, I want to be on Facebook. My mom will let me be on Facebook. I'd love to be able to have a news feed and chat with my buddies and show them what my goals are, right? We thought, wow, what a great idea. Financial goals, social goals, this is going to change the way kids think about and use money. Colossal failure. We actually tested this concept in 1,500 beta users. All of them used it heavily for the first 4 days, and after day 4, it was like crickets were chirping. You couldn't figure it out. Second product. The first product was actually geared more towards desktop, laptop, and tablet, mostly because kids were also telling us in the room, yeah, like I use my mom's laptop, I use my mom's iPad, I use my mom's Kindle. So we're like, yeah, it's probably about tablets, it's more of a leisure activity. Then we went to mobile, and the first product was geared towards kind of 7, 8, 9-year-olds. Another big problem with that strategy, which I should have known because I had 2 of them at the time, 8 and 9-year-olds don't think they're 8 and 9, they think they're 15, right? Big problem, big misalignment in the product. The second one was on a mobile device targeting, kind of 12 to 14, 15-year-olds, more about, workflow in the household, right? Then we started talking to the moms and dads. What do you really want? Moms and dads said, we want scheduling. I want my kids to do chores. I want my kids to remember that they have 4 things each week they're supposed to do. So user-centric. We also tapped into kind of what I call the greed factor. What do you want? There's what we call kind of the greed and vanity factors that drive social media. LinkedIn is a good example of the vanity factor professionally, right? It's a professional tool, but it's really your place to shine as a professional. That's vanity. And Reid Hoffman, one of the founders, talks a lot about that. Mark Zuckerberg talks a lot about the greed factor. Here's how awesome I look. Here's the thing I bought. Here's the vacation in Acapulco I went on. As sad as it sounds, if those elements and characteristics aren't inside the app or inside the product, you're probably not going to tap into a mass market appeal because we've all been kind of trained to use the product that way. We weren't able to hit that chord or hit that gear on money. Money is something that is it's controversial, it's scary, it's personal. And so we evolved into what we call the follower model, right? look at what other kids are doing, right? Here are the top tycoons, right? This kid bought an Xbox, this kid bought a Wii U. Made it familiar, fun, easy, instructive. Still, no product market fit. This product, by the time we got to this stage, we had signed up about 37,000 users, which, I'm not saying that's good or bad. In our case, it wasn't good enough. We needed to make money on this. This was a for-profit entity. 40,000 users or so. The problem wasn't growth, it was actually retention, right? And what we learned was that when you listen to the mom cohort that wants more scheduling, more calendaring, right, that becomes about 5% of the market. Some people call them tiger moms. Like, you basically you over-engineer a product for a very small market, which, by the way, doesn't have a control issue with money. They actually have a control issue with their kids. So we're kind of missing the mark on that. This is just more kind of product shots about what we were looking at. So this concept, socially beneficial strategy, let's improve the way kids think about money, I think aligned towards a for-profit goal, probably a wrong call from the get-go. Our investors invested mostly because of what we learned this morning, character and expertise. Doug had actually sold LendingTree to Interactive Corp for about $700 million at that point. I hadn't done that in my career, but I had a few good wins on my sheet. All the investment capital came in because of who we were. We had no concepts on the table when we raised $1.4 million. Over the past 4 years, we pretty much spent all the money that we raised, and we still haven't found the fit, right? So I'm not giving up on the idea, nor is Doug. We actually were chatting about it last night and looking to take another direction. But when I look back, that alignment of a socially beneficial outcome and a for-profit entity, that might actually be the problem, right? At the end of the day, it's not did you hit the chord yet with the kids, or did you find the right design, or did you find the right application? It's, at the end of the day, the investor group and the board are pushing us to grow fast or fail. And sometimes those dynamics need to be just right. This one, this company might need more of a nonprofit developmental kind of education, public education slant versus let's be Facebook, let's be Instagram. So kind of giving you a personal, kind of almost a battle scar story from my life. Sometimes when you want to go for the ring, the brass ring, the money and the growth, you want to follow the social media innovators, you're actually hurting your chances of success. This is not my startup, but it's I'm spending pretty much all my time in this startup, and some of you might have heard about this locally. ClearPath is a 501c3 foundation started by an entrepreneur named Jay Faison. Jay sold a company 2 years ago, grew an interesting company over the course of 8 years, and he took $165 million of the proceeds of the sale and put them into this nonprofit. The goal here is to empower people to take action that will accelerate kind of clean energy, right? So very kind of nondescript, safe kind of mission statement up there. What we're really doing in ClearPath is we're trying to convince conservatives and Republicans that clean energy and climate are an issue. Literally, Jay is a Republican, Jay is a conservative. He also truly believes that climate change is the biggest risk and the biggest opportunity of our time. So when I hooked up with him the end of 2014, he was already about a year into the foundation. His idea was, let's build a digital platform to educate not the people who are already converted, but the people who aren't converted. Like, how do we do that? This is a very controversial topic, right? I mean, we've heard a lot about it in the past week with the Pope being here in the United States talking about it. It was mentioned in the Republican debates, primary debates last week, where Rubio is basically saying, like, I don't think climate's a problem. So he is our target market, right? We view everyone from the presidential candidate, Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush, right, down to the person who's sitting in their home right now thinking, like, I don't believe it, I don't care. So what we're doing there is we're doing the same build, test, learn, optimize that we would do in any other software company or any other product company. We're just doing it with messaging, right? What are the messages that conservatives want to hear, right, so they feel open and comfortable with the concept? And that's a very quantitative and very measured activity. And we do it every day. We drive people to articles and content. We drive them from Facebook, Twitter, and the Google Display Network, and we literally watch how they engage with the content. The goal here being, the end of the day, it is a C3, so we're trying to drive public education, but to educate the public enough to kind of say, yeah, I think I'm interested in that. I don't want to debate whether or not polar ice caps are melting, but I do want to talk about how solar technology increases jobs in the state of North Carolina. or how solar energy could impact Michigan's economy and the state of Michigan. What's that?
Because it's still the global warming is still kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's just.
Yeah, go for it. No, what were you gonna say?
No, that was it. I'm sorry. I myself speaking.
Okay. Yeah. So personally, like I've actually read a lot of science. I've actually met with some of our scientific advisory board. I obviously have met with them. I'm convinced that something's happening, but I'm not really convinced we know exactly what we're doing and what the impacts are. I do believe the models are correct. And at the end of the day, this organization isn't about proving the science. It's actually about showing people that if the science is half right, there's still several core issues that we think we can solve. So I'm not here to kind of be on the bully pulpit about this issue. Super activated on the concept because I'm in the midst of this project. This is about transforming and disrupting how people consume information and learn about this topic. And we're putting it under the auspice of clean energy at the end of the day. So more importantly, why is this relevant? Jay's actually created an ecosystem inside a very small community. I didn't know this until I got involved, but there is actually a very strong cohort of Republican leaders and conservative thinkers who do want to solve this problem. So he's kind of built a safe place for people to kind of get together, but he's also created a very active and robust dialogue within that community. That's amongst the people who work at the foundation, his advisory board, his mentors, and actually some leaders who have shown up and raised their hand. The cool thing is Jay runs the foundation like a business. And you might have the same experience being a business person. I've been part of a couple charity non-startups as well, nonprofit charities, and I'm not saying they don't want to be a business, but they don't run it like a business day in, day out. They kind of wake up and they say, okay, we've got to raise money, and then run an event, and then move on to the next raise money conversation and run an event. That's running a charity or a nonprofit. The leadership here is saying we're going to build a platform that's going to basically subsist for the next hopefully 50, 60, 80 years. We're looking at total capital in the foundation managed against like total output, grants that we're writing and money that we're spending. So we actually have a process project manager kind of keeping the trains on time, as we say it, inside the foundation. So project management is crucial to this organization running because it's so easy to get distracted on all the different issues hitting the foundation. It's core to staying to the let's continue to build, test, and learn on these ideas. The other advantage that ClearPath has, which I should point out, is it has a ton of money. Like it had a formation event, which was here's $165 million. And very few startups ever have that benefit, especially in the nonprofit space. And the other thing I've observed there is Jay actually has failed at least twice. The first company he started, some of you might have been familiar with, he started Zobo TV, which was a retail concept where you'd walk in and buy a $10,000 entertainment system for your brand new McMansion somewhere in Charlotte, right? Complete and utter disaster, literally. Like he'll say that too. Failed miserably, right? You know what he did before that? He was one of the largest Blockbuster franchisees in Europe. Bad timing there too. Video cassettes went away. So the guy failed miserably twice. Third business, he figured out how to build an e-commerce platform for the installers of audiovisual systems in their homes called SnapAV. Received private equity funding after growing it, and basically was successful. In 8 years, sold the company for $300 million in cash, right? So failed twice miserably. Third time was a charm for him. Now he's actually giving that money to what I think is a noble cause. But the good news is he runs the company like a startup, like a business, where failure is encouraged. So no ideas are really bad ideas until they're proven to be bad ideas. I think it's a huge advantage, and I hope to see kind of continued success there.
How do they have a lifespan going out of that money? Are they taking in money as well?
Great question. No money is coming in, right? So he's created a business model there. So essentially on one side of the business, we have essentially a hedge fund, right? We have a hedge fund, professional hedge fund manager that's been hired, and then a series of hedge fund managers that are hitting performance targets. And those IRR targets against a risk tolerance on how much cash versus how much equity is invested is mapped against a 10-year financial model. So literally, we're basically on a daily to weekly basis, you're looking at, if market returns stay within this range and our grant making and operational costs are in this range, we'll actually have a self-funding mechanism.
Because they have their money invested, so they have a
Yeah.
pool of money that's generating revenue, and that's paying to support the staff and all the grants.
Yeah, so effectively you have operating expenses and grant money under, it's closer to 15 million of expenditures a year, and the rate of return is actually matching that, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of foundations are doing that, nor do they have the privilege.
But it sounds like a perfect event, fundraising thing, because then you educate people through that event.
Yeah.
And then you get people involved.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Go for it.
With Angles, like not really fundraising, they don't want to turn people off by saying, hey, give me money. I mean, some people might not offer, but they're more about educating, right? That's kind of the,
Yeah.
They have this thing that generates cash over here to fund it.
Yeah. So the first project we released in April was literally a website. It was, like I call it the encyclopedia of clean energy. 127 articles, well researched and thought out, backed by NASA, NOAA, McKinsey Consulting. If you go to clearpath.org, you can actually see it. So it's a publisher. It's actually publishing 2 to 3 stories a week about how clean energy can impact your life in a positive way. There is obviously climate and climate science backing it, but project 1 was let's educate everybody, right? That's what C3s do. Let's educate the public. The engagement metrics weren't awesome. We had that website is wired up, and we use Google Analytics. We used Facebook and Twitter to drive traffic. Within 12 weeks, we optimized towards a new design, which we released in September. And then we're releasing 2 more products. One is called polling.clearpath.org. We're doing public surveys and polls to show the world what people really think about clean energy tech. And then we're we're morphing the original release into a hybrid of a high level 5-minute read and then a deeper dive kind of e-magazine on climate and clean energy. So it's a constantly evolving beast that actually has the advantage of having a slightly different business model and a lot of money in the bank, which is pretty cool. There's something else you've said that I was going to comment on, but I forget. But yeah. How are we doing on time? We've got about 10 minutes left here. Why don't I kind of pause there? And I was going to get into some other ideas, but any other questions, thoughts, comments on ecosystem startups? Yeah.
In related to your clean energy, the question I will ask is what is the criteria for clean energy? And then the other one is also, what is the bound? Is that only bounded to generation? Is it also how you consume also?
So this foundation is rooted in kind of more of a conservative Republican definition, meaning it's anything that doesn't emit carbon or extract carbon from the planet and then burn, consume, combust that carbon as an energy source. So clean energy does include nuclear in this case. Yeah. Yeah. So just some thoughts to take away, I guess. Why does all this matter? And I don't know if, when Tom asked me to try to come to a conclusion on his presentation, it was like, what could people take back? I think he was assuming there'd be a lot of folks that worked inside large organizations in this room. It sounds like that might be the case, but not exclusive, right? So at the end of the day, the entrepreneur is the catalyst, they are the facilitator. And I think if you think of yourself like that first versus I'm the leader, right? I'm here to tell people what to do. I think things are going to end up usually better than worse. But at the same time, it's not really about you. And that's the other big twist here in early stage is it's easy to get wrapped around that axle. Like, this was my idea, it's my money, it's my blood, sweat, and tears. Actually, that is true. And it's also about the people that choose to be around you and choose to work with you every day. So that's another thing I try to take forth. And then it's always about, constantly finding the best people, the best mentors, the right customers, right? Build evangelists is kind of Guy Kawasaki from Apple talks about product or brand evangelists. I think ultimately that's the goal, and inside of large companies, I think it's the same thing, right? If you're building a career as a project manager or an executive or a manager in a large company, it is about building support and evangelists within the organization to help you promote, positive business activity, getting things done. It's more than just kind of grit and grind and showing up on the calls and the meetings and pushing them out. So just some reflections from my career so far.
Yeah, so I would comment on that last bullet on
Sure.
the best people. Leadership, leaders are, you know, from really bad to really good and somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And so as a leader, you know what, or you should know what your weaknesses and strengths are.
Yeah.
And so your success would be to surround yourself with guys and gals who have the strength that you lack. And so you surround yourself with those kinds of people who really creates a perfect situation in terms of the leadership of the organization, be
Yeah.
it profit or nonprofit.
Yeah, I love that, and that's absolutely spot on. One other thing I wanted to touch on briefly, and it's an exercise that we often run. At Seismic, we have 2 professionals that are actually run workshops. They're really geared at kind of getting companies, mid to large size companies, to kind of get out of bad habits and wake up. And so one of the exercises we run is it's almost a simulation of being an entrepreneur. We call it beat and defend. And we've run it, I think, at least 10 times in the past 5 years. And in most cases, the client, in those cases, the outcome from that exercise actually does see its way into being a real product. So here's the simulation for what it's worth. So the participants, and it can be anywhere from 10 people at this workshop to like 30 or 40 people, right? So they kind of show up knowing they're going to have somewhat of a creative exercise. Me or one of the people on our team, we show up, we've got stickers on our laptop, or we're in jeans, we're just a little bit different. We're, everyone else is kind of more formal, right? So we show up and it's like, here's what we're going to do for the next 3 hours. We're going to break up in teams, and here's the simulation. You've just learned that, the investor group or the private equity group or the corporate owner here is going to invest $10 million in the next idea. You have an hour to build a presentation and a pitch around how you're going to kind of beat this incumbent. And most times our clients are actually, in serious trouble. I never get called by Twitter or Facebook to come out and just have fun and talk, right? It's like publishing, right? Charlotte Observer, Miami Herald, Reader's Digest, right? Highly disrupted industries. Jackson Hewitt, tax prep, their main product was basically made illegal, refund anticipation loans. So we show up at these exercises, and most people in the room are scared, right? Like, my job's going to go away. What's this offsite going to do? Am I going to leave this offsite with a different job? And we hit them with, you're here to invent a new business, right? Beat the competition. And it's pretty cool what happens, right? It's kind of interesting what happens. You can kind of see there's risk takers, there's conservative thinkers, and then we get them all up and they all pitch their ideas, and then we kind of talk about which ones are great and which ones aren't great. And usually 4, 5, 6 teams, it's pretty clear there's always 1 or 2 that are better than all the rest. And that's okay, because sometimes you have 2 hours, only the best is going to come out. There's usually a break in the middle where we have lunch and kind of get social. And then this is the best part, right? No one knows this is coming. You say, okay, so everyone pass your business plan to the left, to the team to the left. You're now going to defend that, right, as if you were the CEO of your current company, right? So what's the winning business model? And now, like, you just inherited a business plan, right? You need to defend that. And in almost all cases, that's where the good stuff happens, right? Because you then start to challenge and question everything that your current employer is doing against what you all know is an incumbent threat. The best 2 ideas on beat are always ideas that are already happening in their market, right? It's actually kind of funny. It's like it's somewhat almost like, why haven't we talked about the 500-pound gorilla in the room? Here's who's coming after us. What are we going to do to defend against it? That's ultimately, for me, that's what entrepreneurs are doing all day long. What can I do to beat the market? What do I have to do to defend against the 10 others that showed up that are now trying to take my lunch? And really injecting that into a 30, 40 person team. I've just seen some really cool outcomes. So for what it's worth, there's a product here locally that the Charlotte Observer released last year that was a reflection of that they're super proud of, called Charlotte 5, which is now an e-newsletter targeting millennials. I don't know if you read it or not, but that was an outcome of that. Like, so there are ways for big companies to leverage this process. Sometimes it's just a question of getting out of the shell and getting out of the comfort zone. Yeah.
So if you could only recommend one book to somebody who is an entrepreneur who's
Okay.
trying to evoke social change in
Okay.
some way or another with a product, what would you suggest they read?
One book?
You can name more than one. but-
I don't know if there's a book. Social Entrepreneur. That's a
I mean,
tough
it's
question.
a do-gooder, but you're still trying to make money.
Wow. I don't know if there's.
Contemplate. Okay,
I don't know if
okay.
there's one book. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's about like if you think you have an idea and you don't know like what to do, it's just about reaching out to people and constantly asking, bouncing the idea off. Like I don't read books for kind of guidance, so I'm not the best person to answer that question. But I like to read bloggers. Like I use Medium, which is a self-publishing platform. Sometimes I write on it. Most times I read on it. Medium is a place where I'll just follow different writers who are mostly expressing their failures and winnings on a daily basis. It has a high bias towards Silicon Valley and California because that's where a lot of that's happening. But it was started by one of the co-founders of Twitter. So medium.com, and then you can follow different topics. You can follow social entrepreneurship. You can follow writers who are talking. And it's more current than like 200-page read.
Right,
You know?
that was technically
Yeah.
written last year.
Yeah, I like kind of,
Constant.
I like a la carte, quicker stuff. Yeah.
Your beat and defend exercise kind
Yeah.
of reminds me of another workshop that we had at
Yeah.
which is the Six Thinking Hats.
Okay.
So there's a black hat that you only think about the negative of the idea.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, the persona. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do that as well in Beat and Defend. Have you ever, when we were working at Seismic together, did you ever go to a Beat and Defend simulation with Steve Rye? Probably not.
No,
Okay.
no, I was lucky.
Yeah, so sometimes we force, right? Come on, dude. Sometimes we force those personas on different parts of those teams. That's another really good, whatever you want to call it, workshop technique. Yeah. Cool. Does this mean we're done?
I was gonna say, looking at the time, I think we need to
Awesome.
wrap it up. I think
Thanks for your
today's
time,
not
everybody.
long.
It's great to be here with you.